How's it going, guys? My name's Pedro, and today I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about Apple Silicon, what it is, and why it is you should be excited. So, on the 23rd of June, Apple announced that they'll be beginning a massive transition away from Intel-based CPUs through to their own in-house Apple manufactured CPUs. Now, there's a lot of noise being made about these throughout technology publications, other YouTubers, and the general media. But I guess with everyone and their dog covering it, I thought I'd take a chance to just sort of throw my 2 cents into the pile and sort of talk a little about what does this all mean and how will it affect you and me as consumers and people that buy these products. So I think before we jump into it, it's important to sort of get this out of the way that I'm not particularly an Apple fanboy. I don't personally own a Mac, nor an iPhone, nor an iPad. In the past, I have used Macs extensively. I have owned iPads before and used and owned iPhones in the past. But I guess if I was to put it down to words, I'd be traditionally very much in Camp Windows. I would definitely not call myself an Apple hater. Honestly, I think they make fantastic products, and I think they're really good at marketing their products to their target audience and making a product that is desirable and that just sort of works. But I think with that, let's jump into it. I guess when we talk about the transition from Intel CPUs through to in-house Apple-made silicon, I think we first need to take a bit of a step back and define exactly what Apple Silicon is in the first place. So specifically when I talk about Apple Silicon or silicon in general, I'm not referring to that gooey-like substance that you use to water seal cracks or use to bond plastics together. That's silicone. What I'm specifically talking about here is silicon. So when I'm talking about Apple Silicon, what I'm referring to is effectively the CPU or the central processing unit within a computer. On a very high level, talking about what a CPU is, basically it is the brain or the main processor within your laptop, smartphone, and effectively any other device such as your tablets, such as some cameras. Basically it's the main processor that does a lot of the heavy lifting, or the brain of your computer. Now that we know what silicon is, let's talk a little bit about Apple. So let's wind our clocks back to 1994. Boyz II Men were killing it on the radio, Quentin Tarantino was showing off Pulp Fiction to the world, and Apple was announcing that Macintoshes would be coming out with PowerPC silicon. At the time, PowerPC offered many benefits over its competitors, and over the years to come, it would produce even more wins for Apple and the Macintosh as a product. So now let's wind our clocks ahead to 2005. By this point, PowerPC had definitely seen better days, and this year would definitely not bring any saving graces, especially with Apple announcing that they're planning on moving their entire lineup of computers away from PowerPC through to Intel-based CPUs. Sounds a little familiar to what's going on now, right? So the year's 2020. We can't go outside without wearing a mask. There are impeachment trials for the president. Take me back to 1994, am I right? And I guess Apple's announcing that they're moving away from Intel-based CPUs, all in favor for their own in-house manufactured Apple Silicon or Apple-based CPUs. Now, these are very similar to what you'd find in your iPad, your iPhone, and other Apple products currently available. So now this means for the first time that everything within an Apple product is now essentially controlled by Apple. Now I guess there are arguments on either side of the fence for this, so let's go a little deeper. With Apple now being able to control the entire experience, both hardware and software on their devices, this will allow for better user experiences on their products. Now, by that I mean with them being able to control the hardware along with the software, I guess that now gives them the chance to have a very interlocked and very unified experience to basically perform and allow things to be almost consistent and coherent across the entire range of products. So that means an application on your iPad would have the same look and feel as what it would be on your Mac, as it would be on your iPhone. And I guess we've all been in that situation where we've tried to use an application and use features that are available on sort of your desktop or your Mac or your iOS platform, and then you transition over to another platform like a tablet, and we see that features have changed. The look of the application is completely different. And with this issue can be almost entirely eliminated, and you can basically have an entire cohesive experience with this, with the control of the software and hardware. This now allows Apple to be able to run the same applications and be able to run the same platforms on much lower spec equipment, which we'll talk a little bit about a price drop in a little bit. But yeah, I guess this basically allows them to have a almost tailor-made experience. This is the same reason why an iPhone might not necessarily have the greatest and latest specs out of every other flagship smartphone on the market, but still can perform with the very best. So let's talk a little bit about battery life. With Apple having this transition away from Intel through to Apple Silicon, this basically gives them the chance to focus in on things like battery life. As it is, you can see with products such as the MacBook Air, battery life is very important to people, and being able to use your tablet or be able to use your laptop for more than a day is basically a pipe dream at this point. But moving away to Apple Silicon basically allows Apple to focus in on the prioritization of having better battery life due to ARM chips needing a lot less power than their Intel counterparts. And then I guess along with having that customized and custom-tailored experience, as I spoke about before, this could further lead into better battery life and better performance on the system. So now, the final thing to talk about here, and this is something that I'm a little on the fence about myself, but moving away from an Intel-based chip through to an in-house Apple manufactured chip, I guess this could potentially lead to a price drop per se in Apple products. I would not be able to say, or would not even know, I guess, how big this drop would be, or whether this drop would be coming at all, but I guess all in all, I guess the prospect of having a price drop is still pretty damn good, considering Mac computers exactly aren't the cheapest things on the market, but people buy them anyway. So yeah, I guess having them be cheaper would be, I guess, a win for everyone. And then on top of that as well, that could lead to more sales for Apple themselves. So I guess I wouldn't rule it out, but I'd be a little doubtful on this point here. Now, there are plenty of good things out here, but with that there, I guess there's also the other side of the fence, and a lot of things that are going to be left away or removed when you move away from an Intel-based platform through to a completely in-house Apple manufactured system. So let's talk a little more about that. So now I guess when it comes to talking about the bad or the negatives of moving away from an Intel-based CPU, the first problem that comes to mind is the fact that you're basically losing the ability to run Windows on your Mac. Preposterous, I know. But traditionally in the past, because they were effectively the same CPU, whether you'd run Windows on a MacBook or a HP laptop, for example, effectively you could load it up and just run the same software on both. Now with this transition to Apple Silicon, you're effectively and unequivocally removing that feature entirely, and now you are effectively restricted at best to only using macOS, which for a lot of people will be fine, but for the people that need that flexibility, whether your work requires certain applications that are only on Windows, this is definitely something that people will need to take into mind. Now, down the track, virtualization might be a thing, or potentially hosting the machine you need on the cloud could be something, and you just remote desktop into it. But I guess all in all, it's still not as elegant as just being able to boot into Windows natively onto the device you have. Now, I guess another thing to talk about with this transition is that we definitely are going to see some bumps, some hiccups, and some things that just straight up might not work going forward. I already talked about Windows, but things like specific applications. Now, Apple's already said that for a lot of developers, it'll take a matter of days to move the apps from Intel through to Apple Silicon. And while that's good, I guess there are still issues and some apps that might not make it over. For example, if an app has just been abandoned by the developers and is no longer supported and no longer updated, I highly doubt that's going to be having an update that's going to be transitioning it from Intel through to Apple Silicon. Okay, so now that we've talked a little bit about Apple Silicon, what it is, and now why it's good and why it's bad, let's talk a little more about why I'm excited for it. Because even though there's some bad things, there's a lot that's coming that could lead to a lot of advancements in technology and effectively an overhaul, or at least I feel an overhaul, in the computing experience for you and me. Now going forward, imagine being able to do all your work from your smartphone, being able to have the entire feature set available from your desktop available on your phone, that you could pretty much plug your phone into a monitor and you could just keep continuing your work through a wireless mouse and keyboard. This basically would streamline the experience of like using a device to cut down on, I guess, how many devices we all carry, from carrying your tablets, from carrying a smartphone to carrying a laptop. All of that could be boiled down into a single experience. And honestly, I think the transition to Apple Silicon is the next logical step to get us to that point, to that experience, to that future. And yeah, I guess that's why I'm excited for this, and that's why we should be excited, and you should be excited for this transition. And I guess from that there, I just want to take a quick second to say thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. I really hope you managed to take out of this, and this wasn't just all ramblings of a madman. So yeah, I guess if you liked this video, get subscribed, hit that like button, and leave a comment if you're excited for this transition, or if you didn't know at all that this was happening, or if prior to this it was just a null factor to you. Yeah, let me know about what your experiences and your thoughts on this whole transition is. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. Hope you all have a great day.